There are 2 rules for Bianca in the Stratford house. No dating until she graduates, and no dating until she graduates unless her big sister Kat dates first.
This is 10 Things I Hate About You, and this is Collider Movie Club. Welcome to Collider Movie Club. I'm Coy Jandreau, that's Perri Nemiroff, and we are joined by the great Angelique Jackson of Variety, and I am so excited to talk about 10 Things I Hate About You. But before we get started, I need to let you know that this show is brought to you by Movies Anywhere, presenting Screen Pass. Movies Anywhere is a great service for digital collectors, bringing your favorite movies together in one library, no matter where you purchase them. And now, with Screen Pass, you can give your friends access to your favorite movies without them ever leaving your collection. All they need to do is create a free account at moviesanywhere.com to get started.
I couldn't be more excited to talk about Taming some Shrews. I believe there are 2 shrews in this film, personally. We'll get
Okay, that's fascinating. Perri, how was your rewatch?
Oh my God, I've rewatched this movie more times than I can count over the course of my life. I'm a kid of the 90s. This movie was made for me when I was in school, and it's still made for me as an adult.
This captured more of the zeitgeist than I remembered. Like, it holds up better over time. I really felt that the topical nature of it would throw me off, but it really didn't. I thought this captured high school better than I think any other high school movie, and I hate to be hyperbolic, but I can't think of a better example.
Well, I think it's because this movie has more nuance than anyone really expects when they think of a 90s teen rom-com set in high school that revolves around a relationship like this. And I think a lot of that comes through in the fact that this is just a really good Shakespeare adaptation, because Taming of the Shrew, and I'm not trying to come across like I read Taming of the Shrew yesterday. I think I read it in high school, if I'm being completely honest, but I know how misogynistic that text is, and this movie is not. And I think this is a perfect example of an adaptation where things are changed for the better.
Absolutely. I was going back through it, and I, like you, Perri, I'm pretty sure I read this one. And it just, the idea that they took the basic premise and have a ton of nods to the actual Shakespearean text is great, but they realized that, we don't need to continue along with women being property as they were in 1591, and there's a better way to explain why Katerina, or Kat in the film, is quite so angry, and why she is, the titular shrew in the play.
The actual decision to lean into the anachronisms, I think, is one of the strengths of the film. I think a lot like A Knight's Tale, a lot like Othello, a lot like the movies that really thrive in blending time periods, this allows the language to flow. There are moments that insert direct quotes. There are moments that are pieces of the 90s. There are moments that are timeless forms of speech. And I think all of that combining and having it set in this fantasy high school that's somehow a real high school that I'm very jealous of anyone that attended, makes it all feel like its own universe, which means since there are no rules, all the rules work. And I think that's a real strength that we don't have enough movies like that.
They get away with a lot of what they do here, particularly because of how organically they do everything that you just listed off. It doesn't feel like any of those Shakespeare references are shoehorned in. It's just a very natural part of their world that also serves the characters that are referencing him extremely well. And they also do it in a thematic sense too, and with a lot of the ideas. Like there are certain Shakespeare sonnets that are woven throughout the entirety of the journey that these characters are going through. And I really do think that's why, even though 10 Things I Hate About You is a 90s rom-com that does embrace a significant amount of tropes of that genre in that time period in particular, it's one that stands out because of that.
Well, actually, that's why it works, because you can also just go to the general idea of, like, yes, they would be reading Shakespeare in this English class. They would be, all of the things that you're consuming as a young teenager are the things that you are spitting out and the things that you are relating to. We all know everyone was like obsessed with the Romeo and Juliet type of romance in their own high school. There was always that couple that were like, they shouldn't be together, but they are. So it's this general idea of like, those things just are a part of your natural, normal life. So why wouldn't they be part of the natural storyline of this film?
I want you all to write your own version of this sonnet.
Oh.
Yes, miss, I have an opinion about everything.
Do you want this in iambic pentameter?
You're not gonna fight me on this?
No, I think it's a really good assignment.
You just messing with me, aren't you?
No, I'm really looking forward to writing it.
Get out of my class.
What?
Out, get out!
Thanks, Mr. Morgan.
Shut up.
I think one of the cool things about what they do with the stereotypes here also is that they let characters either push away from them or what everybody assumes that they fit into, but then it lets other characters embrace certain stereotypes because they genuinely want to, and that's part of who they are. And I feel like that's treatment that we don't usually get for that subject matter very often, and I think that's why Bianca winds up being one of my favorite characters, because at the beginning of the movie, you're led to believe that she is just some not so bright, popular girl at school that simply relies on her looks and just wants to go out and party. Well, by the end of it, you get the feeling that there's nothing wrong with her wanting the things that she wants. And she is a full person well beyond that stereotype. And watching her really just like embrace all of that about her and control it for herself, I mean, she is essentially embracing her stereotypes, but she's just controlling them. She's not letting anyone push her into them.
The movie hits so many marks of a high school movie where it's like they go to prom, they have a fight in their car, they get together drunk. There's so many moments that if you looked at this, the macro, and looked at what the plot points of this movie are, you're like, that's just any other high school movie. But adding the Shakespearean elements, adding the fact that they lean into stereotype, putting all those things through, it's almost this meta self-aware awareness, and they never condescend. And I think that's the big thing, is they never condescend the students or the stereotypes. You never feel dumb for supporting this thing because you feel like, oh, I knew that guy, or I was that guy or girl when you were in school. And that's so important to embracing a tone.
You knew that guy, you were that guy, or you weren't one or the other, and it's all okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's a really fair point about it, too, that it is all okay. And it's really interesting when you bring up the Bianca thing, because I think that especially I've read a lot of like people, especially women, when they've watched it younger, they've really been like annoyed with Kat's character and didn't like fully get her. And we're like, oh no, Bianca seems so nice. And why is this girl so mean all the time? And why is she so angry? Or it's the opposite way around. And then they like come to this new understanding. That just speaks to the nuances of these characters and the nuances of the ways that each one of them had their own particular arc of self-discovery and their own particular arc of understanding why it's important that they're different, why it's important that they get to be who they are. You even see with Gabrielle Union's Chastity, she comes off so normal in the beginning and then turns out to be kind of like the frenemy. I just find it really interesting, the idea that when you were talking about Bianca, she always knew that her popularity was kind of a weapon. Like her popularity and the reason why she wanted to be popular was not just because, and she says it in the film, what's wrong with being adored? I love being adored, essentially. What is wrong with that? It is how she gets through her day. So what is so bad about it? As long as she knows what it is.
And I really like that our two couples, their through lines kind of match with each other, which is why they're so good together. You've got Kat and Patrick, who embrace their actual identity instead of the legend of themselves. They connect with others by the end. Like they're connecting is what makes them special. But then the younger two, who it makes sense when you're going through that phase in your life, embracing who they are by themselves is what's important. So one arc is connecting and one arc is finding your true self. And that's the difference between sophomore and senior year. And that's what these characters are portraying. And that falls into so many memories and nostalgias and what high school was. By the time you're a senior, you need to learn how to play nice with others before the world. When you're a sophomore, you're just trying to figure out who you are and identifying with that. So I love that she says, what's wrong with being cool and popular? Because that's her self-actualizing.
Angelique, something you brought up earlier is the fact that this is an adaptation of Taming of the Shrew, but it isn't an actual Taming of the Shrew. I think the movie very well justifies Kat's behavior and her anger in particular. And it's not ever about Patrick trying to change who she is or what she believes in or what she wants. In fact, it's the exact opposite. Kat's whole journey hinges on finding someone who supports her and wants her to have everything that she wants.
realistically, the person that changes the most in the film is Patrick. You know, we see him, he changes a lot of the parts of his identity to get her to like him, but the most part that he changes is he really opens up to her. He tells her all these things about himself that are real when he opens up about what he was doing in that mysterious year where he was absent from school. And that's why I joke that, you know, if any shrews are being tamed, there are two, because I actually think that when you look back as she's, you know, reading the poem and you look back at all the things that he's changed, you're like, actually, the person who got tamed here, if anyone, is Patrick.
I hate the way you talk to me and the way you cut your hair. I hate the way you drive my car. I hate it when you stare. I hate your big dumb combat boots and the way you read my mind. I hate you so much it makes me sick. It even makes me rhyme. I hate it. I hate the way you're always right. I hate it when you lie. I hate it when you make me laugh. Even worse when you make me cry.
One of the moments that I get hung up on the most is the scene in the car, and how in that kind of situation, when he could have went in for the kiss, and that essentially would have had him go a step forward in his mission, he chose not to. And I don't think those are choices that are well represented in these types of movies well enough. But I also like that the movie was bold enough to have him make that choice, but also to have Kat get mad at him for it and see the two of them reconcile after the fact.
It leans out of the more cheesy tropes while leading into them. It's a really fascinating script, and it's a really well executed journey of what it means to be that age, because I don't know about you guys, but I remember all of those embarrassing moments over a decade later of like, I didn't do that. Oh, I did do that. And the party felt very much like a party that you'd go to in high school, maybe not as fancy with the nice glassware, but like that universe felt so authentic. So I love that the choices are really imbuing a great sense of identity in kids. I think this should be shown in school. I hope it is. But like to show Patrick making that decision, to show like a good moral compass with a character that was seen as the bad boy that got out of prison, that's a really important arc. And I'm glad it adapted in that direction. And I think that's an essential part of why this film is so timeless. It was really ahead of its time with the way characters made decisions leaning to more progressive ideals that we're starting to develop today.
I mean, let's just stick with the idea that that's like in a moment of like informed consent, like like enthusiastic and informed. I was so impressed when I watched it back and remembered that moment and remembered the idea that like, oh yeah, like she's super drunk, he drives her home. A lot of the 80s comedies, that would have led in a totally different direction. And here we are in this somewhat post-feminist age where we are like, oh no, this guy is really just a nice dude. He comes off with this bad boy persona, but he's not going to take advantage of this like super drunk girl and like you said, go one step forward in his mission towards getting this money. It's not worth it to him, even though he really does like and care about her. It's starting to be more than just that to him.
The movie is also really good at taking certain ideas and calling them back later on, because the two of them not having that kiss in that moment makes the paintball scene that much more impactful when they're having a kiss like that, where they're both on the same level. They're both ready for it. They both have had this shared experience of whether it's him saying no or her embarrassment, because that was another thing that I really appreciated, because I feel like movies don't talk about what it means to be embarrassed like that too, and didn't like the fact that he had to embarrass himself in order to get kind of back on the same playing field with her. I just feel like it progressed very, very well to make that moment mean so much more than it could have otherwise.
He had to throw himself on the altar of his dignity and then later sing about it. Very important arc moment. And also the following scene after the car with them is the car with Cameron and Bianca, and she instigates the kiss. So one, goes one direction, one goes the other. And I love that the whole movie has these like sibling moments that are counter, and then they suddenly become more simpatico. We see these characters start to identify with each other, and we find out Joey caused all of this, and the reason Kat is who she is. So it makes sense that there's an at-home rivalry. You add that, the pearls representing so much about the mother and her wearing them at the end. There's so many moments that there's this great arc of trajectory that you believe these two as sisters, but that also relates to their relationships, because you have the scene with Cameron where the usual trope would be like he punches the pretty model guy, but instead Bianca does. And I like that it leans like I said, away and in simultaneously as the sisters' arcs are coming together.
And I think it's important, the idea that Joey doesn't ever apologize for who he is, because why would he? There's no reckoning for Joey aside from the embarrassment of the idea that he has no real friends. You know, he has all of this popularity and all of these things, and at the end of the day, when he's punched out on the dance floor, he's there by himself. And that's kind of the little bit of reckoning that he gets at the end of the film.
Oh, come on, get up, you little punk. Oh! Shit, Bianca, I'm shooting a nose spray ad tomorrow!
That's for making my day bleed! That's for my sister!
Oh!
And that's for me!
Oh!
There are a few more things to love about 10 Things I Hate About You, but I do want to remind everyone that this show is brought to you by Screen Pass, presented by Movies Anywhere. With Movies Anywhere, you can give your friends access to your personal collection and let them experience this delightful Shakespeare adaptation for themselves without ever leaving your digital library. Movies Anywhere has over 7,000 eligible Screen Pass titles, so get started today at moviesanywhere.com.
All of the design of the film is really, really special because you visually get so much story told in that too. And that means it can be a really tight 93-minute movie that tells so much tale. You wouldn't expect a Shakespearean adaptation to move like this one does.
And it's also 90s. That set design is so 90s, and the costume design. And that makes me love it even more. Seriously, when I think about what Bianca wears to that prom, of course someone at that time would be wearing that pink tutu dress.
What's amazing is that someone at this time will be wearing that pink tutu dress to prom, because as everything comes back around, it is, and they don't go too 90s to the point where it's like caricature of the time frame. It's just like normal people in normal clothes. So it actually, it's pretty solid on its references.
There are certain things that I'll never be able to separate from nostalgia. In particular, every time I see Joseph Gordon-Levitt's haircut in this, I'm pretty sure I knew a lot of guys with that haircut.
For me, it's like a leather bracelet. I remember wearing like the 1 ring or 2 ring bracelet combo all the time, and I wanted to be that cool so bad, like so bad.
I'm sure you rocked it, Coy.
There was a time. There was a beautiful time. And that also, the stereotypes of high school, the way people dress is so much a part of who they are and what their identity is, but it also shows growth in the characters, because you'll notice that there's a little bit more color in some of Kat's outfits, especially when she's talking to her sister. As they get closer, there's a little less aggression in the arc of her character. And I think that's a really cool thing. And, you know, all of Patrick's clothes have a certain flavor. He has leather pants on. The leather pants are essential. That is wardrobe choice 1. Now, in talking of these characters and their trajectory, I personally love that none of the characters land at a place where they're unrecognizable. A lot of times with teen dramas and high school films, by the time you get to the end of the movie, you're like, they wouldn't even be friends with themselves in the beginning. And that is absolutely a 4-year high school experience. I definitely would have punched freshman Coy in the face senior year. But at the same time, I like that this takes place over the course of like a month or two, and it does feel like these arcs are a realistic trajectory. And I really like that they all self-actualize in such a specific way, and it feels like people you know. Again, the familiarity of it. What was your experience with the self-actualization in kind of not Shakespearean senses? We talked about how Patrick is kind of the shrew that gets tamed, but everyone goes through a very specific journey that doesn't quite read like a Shakespeare play would.
It's going back to something that I brought up earlier, where all these qualities that make them who they are, a lot of them start at the beginning of the movie with kind of a negative connotation. So someone being like a nerdy loser, or, you know, someone being bitchy. And that turns out to be their greatest assets. They just need to figure out a way to channel it and feel supported in doing that.
I don't know why I'm so like hyped on Bianca today. This is like a rare situation for me. Like, justice for Bianca. She seems so, you know, because she does come across so vapid. And in that moment in the car where she, not like before the kiss, but when she admits that she has always been that selfish, that just hit me like in a totally different way in the rewatch this go round. I can't decide if she was making that as a choice because it was a protection for her, or if he was like reawakening it in her. She was just like, yeah, no, I know I'm this selfish. I know I'm getting away with it. Like, I know all these things about me. Or was he bringing this up to her and she was like, oh yeah, no, I realize that's really awful that I do that. I'm starting to lean more the former. Like, I'm starting to think that she kind of always knew this.
You never wanted to go sailing with me, did you?
Yes, I did.
No, you didn't.
Well, okay, no, not actually.
Well, then that's all you had to say. Have you always been this selfish?
Yes.
I just think she's so much smarter than we like to give her credit for, and I'm now curious how much of the vapidness is a part of her act.
Just to give Bianca a little excuse for using that tool, so much of her journey involves her not being able to make her own choices and do her own things, whether it's Kat hiding information from her because she thinks it's for Bianca's benefit, or her dad placing every and any rule on her. So when you think about it, in a sense, that was one of the few actionable things she was able to do.
Yeah. I've had a whole full revelation during this conversation about my girl Bianca. I know Larisa Oleynik thought, she's not as fun and complicated of a character as Kat, but I think she may have been wrong.
There's a line here. Kat says to Bianca, I'm a firm believer in doing something for your own reasons and not someone else's. And Bianca's response to that, well, I wish I had that luxury.
One of my favorite lines is Patrick to Cameron when he says, like, do you love this girl? Do you care about her? Is she worth all of this? Never let someone make you feel bad about going after what you want. I think that's so important too. If you're going for something, feeling bad about it applies to jobs, to relationships, to people, to friendships. It's such an important line to never let someone else make you feel bad about going after what you want. That's such a powerful message. And that's kind of the plot. Like, I love when the movie kind of spells out what the movie's about as a line of dialogue, because that's kind of all of their journey. They're all going through that. And the fact that this ensemble cast with 4 to kind of 7 leads is able to get that trajectory with everyone is insane.
The general idea that we've gone this far and not dug super deep into the just unearthly performance that Heath Ledger gives as Patrick, where he just makes this guy so incredibly wise beyond his years and just so nuanced. I mean, it's a big part of why it feels so romantic, is because it is epic. It is an epic performance to be your first big American feature film. It's just incredible. The ride that and the journey that this character takes you on, and the way he like gently unfolds all of these layers, and then to know the nuance and all of the care that he took in creating this character at only like 19 years old is truly incredible.
It's no wonder this led to Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Julia Stiles, Heath Ledger. Everyone in this is so powerful in these roles that it would not be this good, and we wouldn't be talking about it 21 years later if not for the strength of these characters.
I think the other thing that makes him such a strong character and have such a big influence on the movie is the fact that, and I think this actually makes 10 Things stand out from a lot of other teen rom-coms we see, is that he isn't only directing his good towards Kat when he falls for her, he's got a moment with Cameron that's just so heartwarming, where he's encouraging him to get what he wants. I think, Coy, you brought that up earlier, but the fact that he's taking the time to listen to what everybody around him wants and to impart his wisdom, I think that speaks to who he is. And I just love in the very end when that's just, it's showing from every angle.
The really interesting thing for me is that we meet these characters at a random day in school, and it never feels like we lived without them, which is a really cheesy thing to say. But rewatching this movie made me realize how much of a part of the fabric of who I am is. And I really don't think enough high school movies are able to land that familiarity. And it's really insane to me that familiarity comes from these extravagant circumstances. I've never played paintball with a fistful of paint and a white jumpsuit in a farm. Not once. And all of these situations all feel like they're right around the corner, but that school was way fancier than any public school I've seen. All of these things are just above, but if it wasn't for the arcs and the self-actualization and these characterizations and the acting, it's really just the whole package that ties this together. So Patrick Verona forever.
When you're talking about Kat in particular, coming to her, the big finish of the movie, I feel like it's also well represented in the last lines of the poem she reads when she says, that I hate everything about you, but mostly I hate the way I don't hate you, not even close, not even a little bit, not even at all. And I mean, that's her journey right there. Again, it's justified hate, anger, and rage, but it's also recognizing that hate isn't being directed where she thought it was supposed to be directed, and being able to represent both sides of that. I think it's a pretty incredible accomplishment that this movie winds up selling that journey so well.
It's pretty impressive, the general idea that she is mature enough to still be okay with her emotions and the fact that she's fallen for this person, even though they did do something pretty terrible to her. The general idea that they used her in a bet is pretty gross. But she still is she does know that her journey and what she went through is real. And so at the end of the day, she's willing to live with that.
I've thought about the bet thing a lot, and I'll go through days where I'm thinking, how can you ever forgive someone for putting you in a situation like that? But then I'll get to the end of the movie and be reminded that he takes all the money he gets and he buys her the guitar. Not that, as she says, like, she can't get a guitar every time they get in a fight. It's not going to work like that. But still, that choice shows what's more important to him, the bet or her. And on top of that, it also shows that he's listening and he knows who she is, because that was a callback. Right now, I am very much in the it's okay, he apologized enough camp.
Well, I just want to know what is an appropriate apology for the tambourine, because it seems like that's a smaller apology than the drum set. So, like, where are the rankings? What did you do wrong?
Drum set, guitar, tambourine. What is that tambourine, and how did we get there? And I really like that the amount of care he puts into his apology, the amount of like penance he pays, because it's not just the big extravagant stadium apology. It's not just the big romantic gesture. It's also the begrudging, oh, I did something wrong apology that every young, immature person, like when they're saying things out of anger, goes through. And I love that the movie takes its time, even again with this short runtime, to have those small little moments so that the ending doesn't feel rushed or unearned. I feel like we do believe that Cameron and Bianca are going to go sailing. I do believe that he would learn French for her. I do believe that the strange pocket of school is going to match these people up together. So the guitar doesn't even feel outlandish. It feels like, yeah, that's a justified decision, and they do belong together. And he did apologize. Don't do it again till you get to the tambourine.
One more comment about that big romantic gesture, because that's why those types of moments work in this movie better than maybe some others out there, because they're all justified. Like, the big romantic gesture means more than just like a cool showing for us to, think is wow worthy, because we know why he's doing it. Like, Cameron tees it up for him with the embarrassment thing, and then he does it with such purpose. It's not just a show off. And that's something that I think comes through in Patrick as a character from start to finish.
She never wanted me. She wanted Joey the whole time.
Cameron, do you like the girl?
Yeah?
Yeah, and is she worth all this trouble?
Well, I thought she was, but
Well, she is or she isn't. See, first of all, Joey is not half the man you are. Secondly, don't let anyone ever make you feel like you don't deserve what you want. Go for it.
We've spoken so much about Heath Ledger. I think Julia Stiles does need a shout out, because while I do think a lot of the writing in this movie is very well done, I think a lot of it is like amplified, and some of it only works because of the delivery and the performances, like especially when it comes to some of the comedic beats. But in particular, I bring up Julia Stiles' delivery of that poem. Like, that poem isn't iconic without her performance and how she breaks down in that moment.
The idea that is the first take of that poem is like enough to give her the Oscar alone. I mean, she already had my teen queen crown, but it's spectacular work, because it is so honest and it is so vulnerable, and it does so encapsulate, even better than just the words, what this journey has been for Kat. And it kind of is the most powerful, most iconic moment. And it takes a lot to overtake that stadium scene. Like, every time, I'm sure you guys did this too, rewatching all like the top 10 rankers of, oh, what's the best scene in this? you have to make the poem the one, because this is mainly about Kat's journey, and it is reclaiming everything that the source material gets wrong. The fact that it is so misogynistic, this is really the idea of this woman becoming a woman and really owning her own story.
Also having running parallel to that, the relationship between the sisters and their arc being them coming to a place where they support each other. I feel like those two things together make it so powerful. And that's probably part of the reason why, now that I'm thinking about it, that this movie still feels like it's very appropriate for modern audiences and still has a lot to offer. Those two things just play together so well.
If that performance wasn't that incredible, it'd be like, of course the Shakespearean adaptation ends with a sonnet. But it doesn't feel trite at all. It doesn't feel contrived. It feels like this really powerful moment that led to that. And I also love every interaction with her and the teacher. I love that also, there's so many different build-ups to all these different moments. It's not just about the sisters, not just about Patrick, not just about the class. It's all of these things. And you also feel some of the angst with her and her father. And we haven't mentioned the dad a lot, but his supporting role is so important to all the arcs of these characters, because that slamming in the door of Joey feels so earned. The entire scene where he's up on the rooftop and he's saying all the hip, jiggy slang on the exercise bike after launching a stretchy... Like, there's so many brilliant comedic moments, but that's not all the character is, because the moment he's talking about how fathers become spectators when their daughters become women is incredible. That is such a moment in the film, and all of it led to that. Like, arguably, that's the big denouement of Resolution.
You know, fathers don't like to admit it when their daughters are capable of running their own lives. It means we've become spectators. Bianca still lets me play a few innings. You've had me on the bench for years. When you go to Sarah Lawrence, I won't even be able to watch the game.
When I go?
Oh, boy. Don't tell me you changed your mind. I already sent him a check.
That still makes me sensitive to think about that.
Here. But it's actually also why, and I know, I'm sorry, I'm the only one who feels this way. The idea that the mom leaves never really gets resolved for me, in the idea of like, why was that the choice versus she passed away? Or like, I don't know. I just would have rather him just been a single dad, and maybe we just didn't get into it. But it's such a strong moment because it's just so true.
I can understand that perspective of it, because that's a pretty significant question mark, rather than something that's brought up with a sense of closure, but also pushing the characters forward in a very specific direction. So I understand that frustration. But
I'm just judgmental. That's really all it is. I'm just looking for something to be wrong with this film, I guess.
That's what's so hard is that I could not be a professional critic and watch this movie and say anything except for like Excelsior, like all the details in dialogue, the Heath's through line of being this force of truth and justice, and all of so much of his dialogue is just say and do what you want to do, never let anyone stop you. His brutal honesty, and he's the one that's lying to Kat, like that pain right there. The fact that Kat's just protecting her sister, the fact that Cameron's just this earnest little boy that wants to show his love. There's so much. I don't want to be the guy that's just yelling about the whole summary, but there's so much.
There really is. I think one of my absolute favorite bits overall is, there's this one line where Bianca yells at Kat, "Why can't you just be normal?" And I think this is a movie that takes a line like that and completely dismantles it. I mean, that's what every single character in this movie is fighting for. They're trying to be normal. They're trying to be popular. They're trying to fit in. They're trying to get what they think they want. And the whole journey, and it doesn't work for just one of these characters. It has to be them all influencing each other to really understand this and then run with it, speaking of self-actualization. But it's about throwing away the idea of any sort of normalcy and just embracing what makes you happy and what you want and what makes you unique. And then that's going to benefit everyone around you and yourself. And I think that's what the majority of these characters wind up realizing at the end.
I'm hard pressed to argue with you too much. There's only a few that I have in my top 5 ranking with this one, but it is definitely, I think, one of the best, if pretty high up there, Shakespeare adaptations that we can come up with.
I couldn't agree more. Angelique, thank you so much for hanging out with us and for doing the show. This was a blast. And like, who can ever argue with celebrating 10 Things I Hate About You?
No one.
For anybody out there who knows someone in their life that has not seen 10 Things I Hate About You, guess what? It's Screen Pass eligible. So if you own it, you could share it with them and then everyone can watch it. So get on that, guys. That is your second edition of Movie Club. Thank you so much for joining us. See you soon.